Alright, where do I even begin with this video? It might not seem like it to you guys, given the fact that my channel is still relatively small compared to other gaming reviewers, but in my mind, this video has been a long time coming. Without exaggeration and without sarcasm, Nier is one of my favorite games of all time and has fundamentally changed my life as a person, and is something of a benchmark as to what I consider to be a perfect game. It's a game series that, in my opinion, I believe everyone should play at least once in their life, and in regards to my channel, it's a topic that is so near and dear to my heart that I can't afford to mess it up. Funnily enough, Nier, as well as the sequel Nier Automata, is a series that I find myself rather intimidated by. Not just because of my personal adoration for what these games mean to me as an individual, but also for the fact that the stories these games tell is rather dense and the themes that this franchise chooses to tackle can be a bit of a challenge to discuss. Which, for Nier's series creator and resident meme man, Yoko Taro, is pretty much par for the course. However, in doing research for Nier as a potential video essay, I came to a somewhat distressing conclusion. No matter how many different angles I could choose to tackle the game from, no matter how many hours it would take for me to be able to record and catalog and condense Nier into a couple of videos for YouTube, no matter how much I debated with myself to just discuss Nier by itself in a vacuum and worry about missing a couple details for a later project, I always came back with the same conclusion. To analyze Nier on its own is only half the picture to a vast and expansive tapestry that all began 20 years earlier under a different name. To talk about Nier, we first need to talk about where it all began. This video is not about Nier.
I don't care. What is a world without Furii?
The dawn, and time tells its tale. Dark and blood, it flows, the forest receives.
Drakengard is a game. Damn, that's brilliant. It's a game that I genuinely appreciate for kickstarting the Nier franchise, a series that I am intensely passionate about, but to discuss Nier on its own would be missing some important context. Context I didn't initially realize was missing due to the fact that when I played it for the first time, I had no idea these games were even connected, much less that Nier was a spin-off / continuation of the Drakengard story. With the hints they drop being subtle enough that without memory of the events of Drakengard fresh in your brain, you'll naturally miss the connection. That confusion, however, is something I hope to alleviate with this series of video essays, with my ultimate goal being to analyze this franchise from top to bottom, front to rear, if you will. Disgusting! I hope to make this a sort of comprehensive guide, deep diving into the plots of each game while simultaneously shedding light on how these two franchises connect to one another. Drakengard as a starting point, however, is not an easy game to talk about, and I'm a bit torn with my feelings for it. On the one hand, I enjoy the dark themes Drakengard tries to tackle, and how most if not all of its characters are uniquely engaging while also being deeply flawed, some more than others. On the other hand, however, Drakengard's story is, quite frankly, batshit fucking insane, and coupled with the gameplay being so tedious and repetitive, my experience recording footage for this video sometimes became a bit of a chore. That's not to say that I think the game is bad. If anything, it's a roller coaster of emotions that Drakengard subjects you to that makes it something of a guilty pleasure of mine. As for whether or not I recommend this game, that would be me getting a bit ahead of myself, so let's start off with the basics. That of course being how this game came to even exist. Drakengard, also known as Dragon Dragoon in Japan, was released on the best console of all time, my darling PS2, in 2003. It was developed by the now defunct studio Cavia and was published by Square Enix. The original idea for Drakengard was a game like Ace Combat, a revolutionary aerial combat simulator, but with dragons in a European fantasy setting. However, not long into development, the gameplay for Drakengard radically shifted focus from aerial to ground combat after the release of Dynasty Warriors 2, which became massively popular in Japan. The push for this change in design took the development team by complete surprise and was exceptionally difficult to program, given the fact that they were halfway done developing an aerial combat simulator that they now had to shoehorn Musou-style combat into. Like, I can't stress this enough, these are two completely different games. On top of that, the only games that Cavia had previously worked on before this was a soccer game, a grid-based one-piece RPG for the GBA, and a Resident Evil light gun shooter for the PS2. So, safe to say, this was a tall order to complete. Now, as for the development of Drakengard's story and tone, this is where Yoko Taro enters the picture. Yoko Taro, also lovingly known as Big Cool Weirdo, has a bit of a reputation for being an auteur in the gaming industry who isn't afraid to cross boundaries with his unique form of storytelling. He's also similar to figures like Hideo Kojima for the Metal Gear series, where he's a sole creative director for the Drakengard and Nier franchise, while also operating as a sort of glorified pimp. Though that is a discussion for another day.
Just wait on it.
Working extensively on every game in the series and functioning as a sort of quality control for anything involved with these titles. The only notable exception being Drakengard 2, which I may or may not talk about at a later time. I don't know. Yoko Taro initially joined the project as an art director, but his designs were not what the team were looking for. They were, however, impressed by his creative writing capabilities, so due to pretty much no one else wanting the job, Taro was instead shifted to director, making him primarily responsible for the game's infamous dark tones and themes. His main goal for Drakengard's story was to separate itself thematically from other more light-hearted JRPGs being released at the time, with Yoko Taro not being content with the idea of just handing the player a happy ending for slaughtering hundreds if not thousands of enemy soldiers. This philosophy also tied into his creative process when writing the main cast for this game, with most of the characters being somewhat morally gray and ostracized from society, while others are just downright demented psychopaths with little to no redeeming qualities that we have to call our protagonists. This is a trend that will continue throughout all other subsequent titles with varying degrees of success depending on who you ask, but for this game specifically, I find that it complements Drakengard's bleak atmosphere and makes this experience all the more memorable. Another recurring feature that is a staple to the series are the multiple endings that you can unlock upon your journey's conclusion. While interesting to watch on their own, together they paint a complete picture as to the message that Drakengard is trying to communicate. So, for this video, I will be reviewing all 5 endings, while also touching on the criteria the player has to meet to unlock them. Also, for the sake of simplicity, I will again be splitting this video into 2 parts. The reason being is that it gives me enough time to do a full comprehensive deep dive into this game and its multiple endings, while also giving you more content to munch on, and is just more manageable for a consistent upload schedule. So, without further ado, this is Drakengard. Hey, Editing Mari here. Sorry for the pause, but before we can continue on with this video, I do want to bring up a couple things. One being that, of course, like all videos on this channel, major spoiler warning for this game's story moving forward, so if this is a game that you're wanting to check out in your own time, I would suggest that you leave now, just as long as you come back. I will miss you. Also, because there's a first time for everything, here's a content warning, as well as a list of some of the controversial topics that will be brought up in this game, but the one I want to specifically point out is this bad boy right here. Unfortunately, this is a conversation that I do have to bring up in this game because I think it would be disingenuous of me to try and ignore a major elephant in the room, but thankfully this discussion is relegated to a small portion of my video, with the timestamp being displayed on screen right now. So if you want to skip this part of the video, hopefully this makes your viewing experience all the more comfortable. Yeah, that's it for me now. Bye, have a great time. Our story takes place in an alternative fantasy version of medieval Europe called Midgard, where we are directly flung amidst a battle between 2 warring factions. On one side, you have the Union, who are a coalition of several hundred smaller states and provinces that are banded together to protect their lands from a mysterious but ever-expanding military force. On the other side, rallying under the banner of the Three-Eyed Twins, is the Empire, an army that has been possessed by an unknown entity into becoming a bloodthirsty, red-eyed hive mind with only one goal to drive them forward. It isn't immediately explained to the player, but in this world, the only thing protecting Midgard from falling into total chaos are 4 elemental seals, 3 being split between the nearby territories of the desert, ocean, and forest seals, with the last being embodied by a woman, the seal of the goddess. Chosen spontaneously by a mark that appears on her body, the goddess carries the weight of time and space on her shoulders, acting as a last line of defense against whoever would wish to bring the world to ruin. The goal of the Empire is to destroy the seals, plunging Midgard into turmoil and bringing forth the end of the world, but as to who is pulling the strings behind the curtain is for now still left a mystery. The game starts with our main character, Kaim, a former prince of a small kingdom that has since been destroyed by the Empire, fighting alongside the Union soldiers to protect his sister and the goddess of the seal, Furiae. During the battle, Kaim becomes mortally wounded and begins rushing back inside the castle after realizing the Emperor have begun to invade the stronghold. This is where we are introduced to the ground combat in Drakengard, and it is not great.
I've fallen!
For the most part, the gameplay is relatively simplistic, with you running around the battlefield killing loads of dudes while mashing the square button. You'll start off with a 3-hit combo, but that can vary depending on what type of weapon you have equipped and at what level you have upgraded your weapon to. Over time, you will see a green bar begin to fill up in the bottom left-hand corner, this being your magic gauge that, once full, you can unleash onto your enemies using the triangle button. Again, your magic will initially be pretty piss poor, but as you level up your weapon, so too will your magic become more powerful. Something that is really neat about Drakengard is that every weapon in this game has a different magic effect, so no weapon will feel the same, which is only impressive given the fact that there are 65 weapons. Unfortunately, since all the weapons that you find even in later chapters will always start at level 1, unless you become really invested in leveling up that specific item, I found myself just sticking with the 3 weapons that I had already upgraded to completion. My personal favorite ended up being the Dragon's Bane. It has pretty decent damage output for the most part, but I personally like this weapon due to these sort of purple death spheres that'll roam around the screen, effectively wiping out most enemies left in the room. It's pretty sick. Not only that, but when Kaim's weapon flashes orange, you can press the triangle button to unleash a non-magical long-range finishing blow that can really come in handy when trying to stagger some tougher enemies later down the line. This feature, however, I have a bone to pick with whoever had the bright idea to map a magic attack and a combo finisher to the same button. Like, I would never go so far as to say that Drakengard is a challenging game per se, but later on you'll be introduced to red enemies that are not only immune to magic, but will reflect it back at the player if hit by it. So unless you want to slog your way through enemies by pile driving the square button straight into hell, you'll want to strategically tap the triangle button to stagger your opponent and finish the job. However, if you're anything like me and have the reflexive capabilities of a dead frog, you'll be seeing this happen a lot. Like, would it have killed them to map the combo finisher to a different button on the controller? Like, how about the circle button? Well, no. That button is already relegated to summoning your companion characters into the battlefield. For the most part, the only character they can control for the majority of the game is Kaim, but as the story goes on, you can recruit others into your party that you can play as for a short time when called upon. They play pretty similarly to Kaim, except for the fact that their magic is a bit more effective and never runs out for the duration they are on screen. However, with their health bar also functioning as a timer that is slowly counting down, they work more as a limited power-up rather than a fully realized player avatar. Suffice it to say, given the fact that you could only recruit 3 companion characters, why not just map them to the D-pad? Because as of right now, that button has just had their thumbs up their ass for the entirety of this game. I should also mention that the camera controls for this game are unfortunately really awkward. Like, you can pan the camera left and right to some degree with the right stick, but you can only crane the camera so much before it snaps back right behind Kaim. Not only that, but if you want to look behind Kaim's back, you can't just turn the character while moving. You physically have to stop, turn 180 degrees from whichever direction you were currently facing, and only then will the cameraman decide to look at what's behind you. This isn't an issue if you can see your enemies straight in front of you, but God forbid if you get overwhelmed by a large group of enemies attacking you from any other direction other than forwards. This specifically becomes a problem with the horse enemies. They'll charge at you, knock you prone to the ground, and by the time you recover and try to hokey pokey your ass around, you just hope you're looking in the right direction before... Now, to be fair, you could chalk this up to 3D gaming still being relatively new, with most studios still experimenting with how to implement camera controls before it became common practice to relegate that feature to the right analog stick. Regardless, it's still really annoying to have to manage, and it just goes to show that the game mechanically hasn't aged all that gracefully. Upon successfully infiltrating the keep, we rush out into the courtyard, where we come face to face with our second main character, the Red Dragon. Even though the dragon is nailed to the floor and dying at his feet, the creature reminds Kaim of his parents' death, witnessing his parents being devoured by a black dragon. In that moment, he lifts up his sword, seeking to end the creature's life, only for the dragon to spit back words of pride, sharing the same sentiment, but for her disdain towards humanity, believing all humans to be bloodthirsty vermin willing to kill their own in exchange for power. Nevertheless, even though both of these characters share the same level of hostility towards each other, they also recognize that they will die if left on their own. Determined to live no matter the cost, Kaim commands the dragon to make a pact with him to ensure their mutual survival. In the Drakengard universe, man and beast can fuse their life force together in what is known as a pact. By merging their souls together, both parties gain something of a second wind, healing their wounds instantaneously while also granting the ability to communicate telepathically with one another. However, there is a cost to this sort of power, as the human must pay a heavy price to obtain this inhuman strength. Overall, I think this is a really neat idea, and it's a concept that will be expanded upon in later titles, but on its own, it does raise some interesting questions. Like, what exactly are the limitations to what you can make a pact with? Can you make a pact with only creatures of myth, or can I just walk up to my dog and ask to be pact partners? Also, what exactly is this supposed to be? My immediate assumption is an individual soul, but if that's the case, can you just reach into your chest and pull that shit out for show and tell whenever you want? Like, bro, please stop. You're making me incredibly uncomfortable. I am going to call an adult on you if you don't stop this right now. After forging a pact with the red dragon, the creature breaks free from her confinements and takes to the sky with Kaim on her back, leading us into our first aerial mission. Like I said at the beginning of the video, the original idea for the game's combat was solely focused on aerial missions in the style of Ace Combat, and in my opinion, this is where Drakengard shines in the gameplay department. During these segments, you'll control the dragon with your main goal being to shoot down enemy minions while also dodging the projectiles fired back at the player. This can actually be a bit of a challenge, with some maps having tens, if not hundreds of enemies, all of which are aiming at you simultaneously. This at times can devolve into a bit of a clusterfuck, but like in a good way, and when you complete these segments, you can really feel a sense of accomplishment at the end of a level. The dragon also feels like it has a bit of weight behind it, so when you're maneuvering around the battlefield, chasing after enemies to blast them out of the air, it authentically feels like you are controlling a heavy apex predator. The dragon has two main forms of attack. You can either shoot regular fireballs at a singular enemy, with fireballs doing more damage but having the chance of missing their target, or you can lock onto your enemies with this attack doing less damage but can hit multiple targets and can quickly fill up your magic gauge. With the magic gauge full, you can execute a super powerful explosion that will most of the time wipe out any enemies in the surrounding area, which in the segments with dozens of enemies is a great way to quickly gain the upper hand. Though, I don't know if it's just me or if it's my perfectly legal copy that I'm using to legally record footage, but every time that I would execute the magic attack, the sound effect that plays is so loud and bassy that my innocent little ears just couldn't handle it. Circling back to the ground missions, now that we have access to the red dragon, we can also summon her during these combat segments and attack enemies from the sky. The dragon is a really nice addition for these levels, especially since some of these maps can get quite vast and overpopulated, so on top of cutting down on travel time, her fireballs are a great way to annihilate waves of enemy soldiers. Not to mention that upon executing her magic attack, Grandpappy in the next room over started having Vietnam flashbacks. Oh god, not this shit again! Now, obviously, hopping on the dragon to mow down enemies like you're mowing your lawn is a bit of an overpowered buff. So to balance this, we can get knocked out of the air by ranged enemies like archers, creating a situation that until those minions are taken out, we can't call down the dragon and we'll have to travel on foot. There are also just some maps that are simply too claustrophobic, where the dragon doesn't have the proper flight clearance, so even if you try to call upon the dragon, the game will give you a heads up that she cannot be summoned. In summary, anytime that the dragon was on screen, I was having something akin to what most people would call fun. To me, it's quite obvious that the aerial segments were what the development team was most passionate about, and if this game was given the proper time to hone in on this niche, I think Drakengard would be remembered more fondly as the dragon flight simulator it was originally meant to be. Especially since other than the Panzer Dragoon series of games, it is still a concept that has gone completely untapped by any other competent game studios. Unfortunately, due to the meddling of Square Enix pressuring Cavia to incorporate hack-and-slash gameplay to misguidedly compete with Dynasty Warriors, all we are left with is a game that is perpetually split down the middle. One side feeling half-baked and uninspired, while the other side feels like a potentially great game that wasn't given the time to be fully realized. Anyways, upon returning to the ground, we quickly find out that the price Kaim had to pay for his power was his ability to speak, leaving him with a pact emblem on his tongue to physically show what part of his body he had to sell in this contract. As such, he is left mute and is pretty much considered a silent protagonist for the remainder of the game. His only form of communication now is through the Red Dragon herself, as she can read his thoughts and emotions while also being able to speak to other characters for the both of them. This actually ends up being quite a compelling detail in their relationship, especially given the fact that Kaim is quite literally the embodiment of everything the dragon hates about humanity. According to Yoko Taro, Kaim was meant to be something of a deconstruction of the hero archetype that was and still is prevalent in most video games. With Taro's belief that any character willing to slaughter hundreds upon hundreds of people, regardless of whether they are good or evil, cannot be considered normal.
You're weird!
Even with him being unable to speak, this is all pretty well translated through his body language, where it is quite clear that anything that doesn't directly benefit his goal of killing anyone that stands in his way is of no concern to him. Hell, even when he does do something that on the surface seems heroic and noble, it most likely aligns with his ulterior motives of satiating his bloodlust. The Red Dragon, in contrast, is a very proud member of the dragon species, who sees all other races as inferior. Having lived for over 10,000 years prior to the events of the game, she has witnessed countless atrocities committed by the human race in her lifetime, mostly against their own kind, but also against her fellow dragons. As such, she harbors a deep disdain for humans, so for her soul to be intertwined with what she considers to be the worst humanity has to offer is downright shameful in her eyes. That, however, does not stop her from playing mind games with Kaim, looking directly into his thoughts and rightfully criticizing him for his lack of compassion towards others and his short-sighted goals. Even though I wouldn't describe the dragon as a particularly caring person, with her only dog in this conflict being to prevent the end of the fucking world, in comparison to Kaim, she might as well be Mother Teresa. In later interviews, Yoko Taro admitted that the original idea for Kaim and the dragon's relationship would be similar to that of a parasitic one, with Kaim acting as a parasite and the dragon as the host. This didn't end up being the case in the final product, but in some of the dragon's dialogue you can still feel traces of that original idea, especially since at times their partnership can be viewed as a bit one-sided. Thankfully, as the story progresses, Kaim and the Red Dragon do develop a sort of mutual understanding of one another, so they aren't downright hateful towards each other for the entirety of the game's runtime, but that is something I will touch upon later in the video. Upon reaching the top of the castle, we're properly introduced to Kaim's sister Furiai and his childhood friend Inuart. Inuart, who is a naturally talented musician, was initially betrothed to Furiai before she was chosen to be the goddess of the seal. However, something I failed to mention before is the steep price the woman must pay in honor of becoming a goddess. That being, whoever is chosen by the mark is condemned to live as a recluse for the rest of her life, never being allowed to marry or bear children. Worse still, the mark subjects the maiden to horrible physical pain, so great that many goddesses choose to commit suicide rather than continue to endure this ordeal. So, safe to say that even though it is a necessary burden, it's a task no one would voluntarily take part in. That being said, Inuart still loves Furiai with all of his being, and is adamant in protecting her from the Empire forces. Not very effectively, as he throws the guy right on top of her.
Know your fucking place, trash!
When Kaim enters the room, he begins repeatedly stabbing an already dead soldier. Like, damn, calm down, Kaim, you're scaring the hoes. Due to the castle no longer being safe, Inuart suggests that they take Furiai to the elf village, where the elves are bound to eternal neutrality. But before the party can set off for the forest, Inuart proposes to sing a song on his harp to celebrate the reunion of the companions he holds most dear.
The usual song?
I love you, bitch. Oh my God. I ain't gonna never stop loving you, bitch.
However, upon reaching their destination, they find that the village has already been decimated by the Empire and it is nothing more than a pile of ash and dismembered bodies. Even though Inuart is left shitting himself by the destruction that lay before him, the dragon intercepts a message from Hierarch Verdale, asking them to bring Furiai to the desert temple for her own protection. Something I don't believe is explicitly stated in-game is that pact partners can telepathically communicate with other pact partners via thought. I'm not sure what the in-universe reasoning behind this is, but I'm sure it has more to do with the aerial missions, letting other characters speak to Kaim even when they are in the air. Think of it kind of like the intercom system in games like Star Fox.
Do a barrel roll!
Verdale is a holy priest of the seal, who made a pact with the dragon who has since been petrified, meaning he's pretty much useless combat-wise. The price he had to pay for his pact was his hair, which in the grand scheme of things is not a bad deal. For inhuman strength, telepathic communication, and the ability to straight up not die, all for the low price of some sick nasty tattoos and some alopecia? Bitch, sign me up! As Furiai and Inuart go on ahead to intercept the priest, Kaim stays behind to investigate the village, finding a message written in blood.
Speak not the watchers, draw not the watchers, write not the watchers, sculpt not the watchers, sing not the watchers, call not the watcher's name. What is this?
We also find an elf woman barely clinging to life who tells Kaim that the cult of the Watchers has a shrine deeper into the forest that imprisons the elves who have been taken captive. The dragon tries to ask the woman for more details as to what the Watchers are, but the elf passes away before she can give any more details. Something you may have noticed while watching the footage for this game is its unique way of portraying its story segments. For the most part, the game still has era-appropriate pre-rendered cutscenes for character introductions or for high-spectacle fight scenes, but you'll also have these scenes where the characters are fully animated and voice-acted with their dialogue appearing at the bottom of the screen. I kinda like these scenes, as they do a pretty superb job at showing off the character's personality through their physicality. Especially with Kaim, seeing as he is no longer able to speak, his body language goes a long way in showing off how much of an asshole he can still be to others. One thing that I do find rather odd is that the camera itself is like 15 feet up in the air, so you can't actually see small details like facial expressions. That's probably why they have the character portraits on the left side of the screen, to focus on whoever is currently talking. Unfortunately, the facial rigging for the models do not appear to be sophisticated enough to properly communicate what the characters are feeling in any of these scenes. Instead, they just kind of look like Muppets opening and closing their mouths, and even that isn't properly captured half the time. Take this scene when the party arrives at what is left of the elf village.
Hell has come here. What shall I do?
Inuart's voice actor does a really great job making him sound appropriately distraught at the horror he is faced with, but if you were to just look at his portrait, what is this expression? Is it annoyance? Apathy? Hell, is that a smile? Anyways, it looks dumb. Moving on. Upon reaching the shrine, Kaim and the Red Dragon not only find the cultists protecting what remains of their temple, but they also find some Empire soldiers fighting alongside them, with the priests leading the charge. As for what the Cult of the Watchers' motivations are, or why the Empire chooses to align themselves with this group, will for now remain a mystery, but due to this encounter, Kaim begins to suspect that these two factions are connected by some evil outside forces. Maybe it has something to do with those red eyes. Anyways, unfortunately for us, the captive elves are nowhere to be seen, with the dragon assuming that they have already been taken elsewhere. Just then, the dragon loses Verdelay's voice, suggesting that they hurry to the desert temple. But before they can depart, a young man crawls over to Kaim, begging him to save his nearby village located inside the Valley of the Fairies. And for some reason that I can't even wrap my brain around, Kaim chooses to go back into the forest towards the elf village. This decision even goes against the dragon's advice. Like, dude, this man is supposed to be protecting your sister. Why are we going on side quests right now? Like, time and place, and the time is not now and the place is over there. In the sky, we take out the Imperial forces located near the Fairy Valley, but sadly we are too late as the village has already been set ablaze. In this chaos is when we are introduced to the first playable ally we can recruit into our party, a hermit by the name of Leonard. Illuminated by the light of the flames, we find him kneeling before what remains of his burning hut and the bodies of his 3 younger brothers. The man, overcome by grief and self-hatred for being the only member of his family to have survived, attempts to commit suicide while pointing a knife to his throat. However, due to his fear of death, he fails to take his own life and is left to mourn the loss of what little family he had left. Now, you may be thinking, wow, this is really fucked up, and I really feel bad for this guy. Surely things can't get any worse from here, right? That is until you realize why he was away from his village in the first place. Unfortunately, this also coincides as to why Leonard is probably the most controversial character in any of Yoko Taro's games, and why he is understandably one of the biggest reasons I have difficulty recommending this game to others. To avoid further pussyfooting around the issue, Yoko Taro has gone on the record stating that Leonard is canonically a Minecraft YouTuber with an attraction to young boys and is suffering from survivor's guilt.
Could you have a seat over in that chair, please?
Supposedly in development, Taro had plans to further explore this aspect of Leonard's character, but due to the concerns of other developers on the team, these scenes were either scrapped or heavily censored. Especially in the version of Drakengard we got here in the States, where any mention of Leonard's dark desires have either been expunged from the game or are left pretty ambiguous. This also includes the reason as to why he was away from the cottage during the attack on the village, being that he was having some private man-to-hand time in the woods, but without that context you would have no idea as to what this guy's damage really is. Which, in a weird way, I think the censorship actually works in Drakengard's favor. Now, hear me out. Without the understanding as to what Leonard actually is, if you were to go into this game completely blind, he appears to the player as a polite and well-mannered monk who hates violence and is overall a pacifist. Even during his bonus chapter that is meant to flesh out what little character he has left, he is seen pleading to Kaim to not kill the child conscripted soldiers that were abducted by the Empire. And as the story goes on, we see that he is weighed down by an all-consuming guilt that, due to the game's censorship, goes unaddressed, but otherwise, he seems like an all-around good guy. And that, in my opinion, is what makes him scary. Especially if you were to find out that he has these tendencies and went to go back and rewatch his scenes, it paints all of his actions in a completely different light. In conclusion, do I like Leonard as a character? Fuck no. Do I think it was necessary for him to be included? I wouldn't say it was necessary for him to be in this game, but at the same time, I understand that he, as well as the other characters, tell a broader picture of Yoko Taro's main point. That point being that war is ugly, nothing good can come from death and destruction, and that war reflects the darkest aspects of what humanity has to offer. I know this may come off as a bit of a tangent, but it wouldn't have sat right with me if I tried to move on with this review without at least touching on this character's existence. Child abuse and childhood sexual abuse is very real, and even though I'm a small YouTuber, I feel like it's my due diligence to at least inform people that this type of character is involved in this game and is considered to be an ally. Now, before moving forward, I do want to bring up two more things. One, it has never been confirmed that Leonard has actually hurt a child. For most people, that is not enough for him to be considered a good character, regardless if he has ever acted upon his dark fantasies or has only thought about them, and that is a totally fair conclusion to make. More power to you. I have no interest in changing your mind, but I do feel like it is important for me to bring this up because that was the only way I felt comfortable in even finishing this game. If I was under the impression that he had actually harmed a child at any given point and we were forced to have him tag along with our party, I don't think I'd be making this video right now. Which also brings me to my second point. Drakengard does not in any way endorse
Minecraft YouTubers.
Leonard, throughout the entirety of the game, is portrayed to be a pathetic loser, who's treated like absolute shit by the rest of the cast. Even Leonard doesn't like Leonard, recognizing that he's trash and is disgusted by his own desires, wishing he had died instead of his brothers, and this being the reasoning behind his survivor's guilt. So, for the rest of this video, I too will be clowning his goofy sideburn looking ass. In the spirit of To Catch a Predator 2024, put him up there. Anyways, back to where we left off. Right after Leonard fails to take his own life, we are introduced to the actual worst character in this game.
Sorry, pitiful little brothers, dead on the ground. What fun! What fun!
Taking advantage of the man's weakened mental state, the fairy pressures Leonard into forging a pact with it in order to feed off of his misery. Though I know Leonard is not right in the head, because what in the hell motivated you to make a pact with this sadistic Keebler elf looking motherfucker? Like, he is so mean for no goddamn reason, and now he has to be my problem too? The price for his pact is his sight, with the brand being seared into his eyes. You know, keep them puppies closed, no one needs to see that. On our way to the desert temple, we run into Furii, wandering by herself with no escorts. She informs Kaim that Verdale and Inuart have been captured by the Empire and are being held in a prison not far from the temple. We try to reason with the princess to come with us, but she says something odd.
I will be safe. I am a goddess after all.
No, what the fuck are you smoking? They're trying to kill you because you're the goddess. Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
Who do you rely on to do your thinking?
After infiltrating the Imperial prison, we succeed in rescuing Verdile, who informs us that Inuart is being held in another location. He also reveals to us the Empire's true motives. By breaking all 4 elemental seals, not only does the Empire hope to destroy the world, they also hope to summon something called the Seeds of Resurrection. It is supposedly a device which will protect humanity from the world's ruin, but as to what the Empire intends to use them for is still unknown to the party. During this conversation, the dragon says something interesting.
The Seeds of Resurrection? Humans twist even the myths to their own purposes.
Keep this in mind, this will become very important later. Meanwhile, we see Inuart wrapped in chains, cursing himself for not being strong enough to protect Furiae. Just then, a figure cloaked in shadow speaks to Inuart, digging into his insecurities while also speaking to his innermost desires.
If only I had more strength, then I could protect Furiae. I could protect her and make her my own. All mine, Furiae, all mine, all mine, all mine. No man can have her, no man. Not even Kime.
The dark figure then whispers to Inuart, saying there is another path, a way for Furiae to be free from the burden of being a goddess, to live her life as a normal woman and as his fiancée once again. But first, he needs more strength. Strength that comes with a price.
If she ceases to be a goddess, can she become a woman again?
Yeah, boy.
Jumping back to our main party, we see Kime and the others making their way over to protect the desert seal, only to find that the temple is swarming with the undead and that the seal has already been broken. Heading back to camp to discuss their next move, they find Inuart's harp discarded in the sand, but no sign of their companion. Before the party can even have the time to process the idea that Inuart might have been killed, Verdile hears a weak but strange voice call out to them, and the dragon detects that it is coming from a nearby jail. Jail, spelled G-A-O-L. I had to look this up. This is a real word, and it exists just to spite me. Upon infiltrating the Gaul, we come face to face with our second playable character, Ariosh. We don't get to really know a lot about Ariosh throughout the game's story, but what we do know is that she is an elven woman whose husband and children were slaughtered by the Empire forces. At some point after her family were killed, Ariosh had made a pact with Undyne and Salamander, the guardians of the elements of fire and water, sacrificing her womb and the ability to conceive. As such, she was driven to madness, leading her to murder all those who are unlucky enough to meet her, especially children. This also leads her to cannibalizing her victims, her crazed mind thinking that in doing so she could protect them inside her womb. Of course, after enough people had gone missing, Ariosh was captured by the Empire and taken to where we find her now. And, of course, upon officially meeting her, she is completely off her fucking rocker and tries to take a bite out of Kime, but not before Verdile subdues her with one of his spells. Even though she is a cannibal and batshit crazy, the party decides to have her tag along in order to protect those she may harm. After recruiting the elf, our dragon levels up as well, making her more powerful while also granting her a brand new form. There are a total of 4 forms that the dragon can achieve throughout the game's runtime, and these can only be unlocked at certain story missions. So if you see her shifting forms throughout different points in the game, that is why. I just felt the need to clarify that before moving forward. Other than that though, it's pretty bitchin'. Same as Leonard, when you unlock Ariosh, you can play through her personal bonus chapter, which leads the party to the seal of the Ocean Temple. Along the way, we hear the harrowing cries coming from an Imperial armada loaded to the brim with elf women and children, who have been taken hostage and are being thrown overboard. This is obviously a horrific situation. However, unless the Empire is stopped before reaching the Ocean Temple, the party have to prioritize protecting the seal, lest the world fall into ruin. And so, the dragon, regardless of the innocent lives lost, rains fire from above, wiping out the Imperial barges. Ariosh, for her part, however, seems delighted with this horrific sight.
So sweet. So sweet. The cute little children. No need to worry. I will take care of you.
Oh, and the seal is broken here too. Oopsie daisy. Upon arriving back to the mainland, we finally reunite with Inuart, accompanied by a new pact partner, a black dragon. The price for this being his ability to sing or create music. He insists that he is now powerful enough to protect Furii by himself, demanding that she come with him alone. However, Kaim steps between them, not trusting Inuart and his motives. Or maybe it has something to do with his blood-red eyes. The dragon also comments that Inuart has been broken and has been brainwashed into carrying out the Empire's commands, acting as nothing more than a pawn. Inuart is like, "Give me the woman," with Kaim being like, "Bro, are you high? I'm not doing that." This of course sets Inuart off, believing that Kaim would sacrifice even his own sister for revenge. As the two childhood friends trade sword blows with one another, the red dragon faces off against Inuart's new pack beast. During the battle, Kaim recognizes the black dragon as the same creature that killed his mother and father. This causes him to turn his back on Inuart and begin charging at his parents' murderer. However, his foolish efforts are in vain as the dark beast aims to fire a powerful fireball at the prince, forcing the red dragon to protect him and tank the blow. With the party left bloodied and incapacitated, Inuart captures Furii and departs with probably the coldest line in the game.
Welcome to a world without song.